You know, as you saw in the news, for years it's been known that it's important our diets contain certain nutrients for survival. Well, you know what? We want to do more than survive. So again, we're not just talking about the nutrients for survival. We're talking about the nutrients for vitality. Richard, we hear about nutrition and nutrients. Any news story, anytime you turn the TV on, it's out there. But I think a good place to start would be to describe the differences in the micro and macronutrients and what exactly nutrients are.
Well, your macronutrients are your foods that you eat in quantity. These would include your proteins, your essential fatty acids, the oils in the diet, and your carbohydrates. And when we're low in these critical nutrients, it's easy, relatively easy to tell when someone is deficient because they're emaciated, they're malnourished, their skeleton figure. It's a starvation state.
So these are things that we eat in large quantities.
Large macronutrients, large quantities, proteins, carbs, and the essential oils. Now we also have the micronutrients. These are nutrients in small quantities, such as your vitamins, vitamin A, C, D, E, you know them folks, the B vitamins, all that group, the minerals, calcium, magnesium, zinc, all of these. And these, when we don't get enough of this type of thing, we develop a disease state.
Okay, question.
A disease state, yes.
Do we make these?
No, we do not. We do not. They must be present in our diet in order to live.
So a diet or another source, but we can't rely on ourselves for these?
No, we can't make magnesium. It has to be in our diet. We can't make vitamin C. It has to be in the diet. Now, over the years, the scientists have learned a lot about nutrition. And we've learned, and I think everybody watching today has heard this concept, if you're low in vitamin C, you develop scurvy. Okay? Scurvy becomes what the scientists call the index disease for vitamin C deficiency. Let's call it the short-term deficiency. Stay with us, folks, because the end point of this discussion can make a huge difference for you. Now, it doesn't take much vitamin C to prevent scurvy. Just 10 milligrams, that is about 2 grains of salt, folks. 2 milligrams of vitamin C a day will prevent scurvy. What about niacin, vitamin B3, another one that we learned very early on in nutritional science? If you don't have enough vitamin B3, you develop pellagra. Dermatitis, dementia, nerve deterioration follows. Only 2 milligrams, that's less than a grain of salt, of niacin will prevent. Again, this is your short-term index disease. Okay?
So does this mean, Richard, that there's almost an absence of these nutrients in your body for this disease state to occur?
Either a total absence or below the 10 milligrams for C, below the 2 for niacin, etc.
But then if a person were to have one of these diseases and they were to include that needed nutrient, then that disease state would abate or go away?
It would be cured. It would be cured.
That's what they mean by short term.
Another one. To give you an example, because I know you've heard of these. Thiamine deficiency results in beriberi, heart failure, dementia, neuropathy, you know, nerve problems go with that. Just a half a milligram, a fraction of a speck of dust of thiamine a day prevents beriberi. Now, we're all familiar with these, and here's the point of this. After learning about these index diseases, these short-term deficiency states, the assumption was if I don't have scurvy, I don't have a deficiency in vitamin C. It'd be easy to make that conclusion, wouldn't it? If I don't have pellagra, I've got enough niacin. Okay? If I don't have beriberi, I've got enough thiamine. But that has been drawn into question today. A second type of deficiency state is being clarified by our brilliant scientists. Now, the victim of a long latency deficiency, that's what we'll call this. Long term, I've got enough vitamin C to prevent scurvy, but it's not enough for vital health. That's the concept we want to get across today. The victim of a long latency deficiency doesn't develop scurvy, but is more prone to degenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's disease, heart disease, and cancer. And I want to give every credit to Dr. Robert Haney from Creighton University. He wrote a brilliant article that really caught my eye in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. He posed the question, what happens over time if we're low in these key nutrients? This is cutting-edge science, folks. It's powerful, and it can make a difference in your health. And to help us understand these long-term deficiency states, we want to look at calcium and vitamin D and folate deficiency and what the scientists have learned about them to help us understand it. Now, With calcium, if you don't have enough in your diet as a child, you do not reach full stature. I'm 6'3". If I hadn't received enough calcium in my diet, I may have only reached 5'6". Stunted growth. That is the index disease. That's a short-term latency. In adulthood, if you don't have enough calcium, it's called osteomalacia. It's a softening, a weakening of the bone. Plus, we have developed in a calcium deficiency state a long list of metabolic problems because calcium is used by hundreds of different enzymes. Now, as recently as 1989, the idea that a long-term calcium deficiency led to osteoporosis was considered ridiculous. Now, we all know that today, don't we? We've seen the advertisements, we've seen the news releases, but in 1989, the British Medical Journal published an article that stated, and I quote, folks, "Low calcium intake plays no role in osteoporosis." Well, that is ignorant and backwards today. That was the thinking, and it wasn't until the early 90s that several studies were conducted and reported in the New England Journal that calcium and vitamin D supplementation dramatically reduces the risk of osteoporosis and reduces the risk of fractures. And those studies have been repeated over 100 times now and confirmed. So here we have it. Let's get this down. If we're low in calcium as a child, stunted growth, index disease. But over time, if we're low, now we've grown fully, but we're low, we develop osteoporosis, a long-term deficiency state. Are you getting the point? This is so powerful. Now, they've learned more about calcium. The nutrient calcium has been studied more than any other nutrient. It's amazing what's out there. Folks, did you know that if you're low in calcium, you're more likely to make kidney stones? And Cindy, what did we tell our kidney stone patients for years? No dairy, no calcium products, because those stones are made out of calcium. Well, what we know now is if you have abundant calcium in your diet, the excess calcium in the intestine binds up oxalate. And that helps prevent kidney stones because the stones are made of calcium oxalate. So that calcium binds it up, pulls it out of the body, and it prevents kidney stones. We also know that it lowers your risk of intestinal polyps and intestinal cancers because the calcium binds the bile salts. These biles are very inflammatory. You get in the picture, long-term deficiency states lead to health problems. Long-term low calcium intake leads to contraction of our arteries. Now, let me explain. Our arteries have a muscle wall, and they're dependent on calcium to contract that muscle in the artery wall. It takes 2 calcium to do the whole cycle. 1 calcium to contract, another to release it. Okay, long-term low calcium levels, those artery wall muscles contract down, but they don't release. That leads to high blood pressure, small diameter vessel, just like a garden hose. Now, if this occurs in the presence of a high salt diet with abundant calories, sounds like a fast food menu, doesn't it? High salt with abundant calories, it actually turns on our fat cells to make extra fat. Low calcium levels lead to hypertension with obesity. In fact, they've done studies to show now if you give people who are not osteomalacia or low in calcium, they're not low in calcium as per the old standard, they will actually lose 12 pounds of fat a year. 1 gram of calcium, 12 pounds of fat. Creighton University says that the midlife weight gain that most of us experience. You know the statement, when I was 18, I weighed this, that, and the other, now I'm 48, and boy, I put on some weight. They now know that that weight gain is due to long-term calcium deficiencies. Isn't this amazing? We also know from the coronary artery risk development in young adults, or the CARDIA study, that a high calcium intake reduces the transition to obesity by 30% and the transition to hypertension of middle age by 62%. Now let's review this. Low in calcium, no osteomalacia, you've got full growth, but you're putting on the weight, the blood pressure's going up, and we've got health problems. We're headed to a heart attack or a stroke. Are you getting the concept, folks?
I've got a question for you.
All right.
Ben, we know that we don't get enough calcium, but in our foods, I'm not talking supplementation, but in our foods, can we get too much?
Well, our body has an amazing ability to turn off the absorption mechanism when it has enough. and you can supplement up to 2 grams of calcium a day.
Good point.
With, after 2 grams, our body doesn't absorb it.
Doesn't use it anyway.
It doesn't use it anyway. But we want a little left over in the intestinal tract to help prevent the cancer that we talked about, the kidney stones, etc. Abundant
Wonderful.
calcium.
Good. Good.
Now, let's do a little on vitamin D deficiency, and this one's very important too. Stay with us, folks. This knowledge is important. We've all been told for years to stay out of the sun. It causes skin cancer.
Right.
And we have enough evidence to support this. If we are deficient in vitamin D, as a child we develop rickets. The bones malform. Long, straight bones develop into curved bones. That's rickets. The chest can actually cave in. In adulthood, if we have a vitamin D deficiency, we have osteomalacia, a softening of the bones, very similar to calcium deficiency. They work together. Vitamin D and calcium do. Well, these conditions are relatively rare today because we fortify our foods. We don't see these index disease states, the short-term deficiency states, as nearly as frequently as we used to.
So these are the very severe cases.
Yes.
And those are almost obliterated. We just don't see them.
But now what we're learning, if you're deficient in vitamin D, just a little over the long term, you're prone to a whole list of diseases. Now let's go back to that skin cancer because this is so important. We've known for 60 years at least that increased sun exposure leads to increased skin cancers, but we've also noticed that the people with the skin cancers have lower rates of internal cancers. Lower rates of internal cancers. Now that caught our attention, the scientists' attention, so they studied it. And they found out that vitamin D plays 2 roles. One is its ability to help us build bones. We know about that. But we also have learned that vitamin D plays a critical role in our immune system. We now know that if you're low in vitamin D, this is from a Finnish study, that there is a dramatic increase in prostate cancer. We know that 20% of all breast cancers are due to vitamin D deficiency.
20%?
Now, breast cancer, what's that got to do with bones and rickets? Nothing. That's our point. Over time, if we don't get enough vitamin D, the cancer rate goes up. The Journal of Clinical Oncology reports from a study that patients in chemotherapy for cancer respond better. It's more effective if they're given extra vitamin D. So vitamin D not only helps to build strong bones, it helps our immune system fight the war on cancer and various infections. You getting the idea? Long-term deficiencies. We pay a price, and these can take years. And you never develop the scurvy, the pellagra, or the beriberi. Isn't this amazing?
It is.
Now, we can go through the same thing with folic acid. In the short term, it's anemia. If you're pregnant and low in folic acid, you have neural tube defects, spina bifida, birth deformities in the babies. Over time, if you're low in folic acid or folate, your risk for heart disease increases. Your risk of stroke goes up. Your risk of osteoporosis. These are the long-term deficiency states. Now, scientists are currently working through the process for every one of the known nutrients. And in time, and it'll take a while, we'll understand each one more fully